Name.
Called Eugenie Sage.
National does not understand, respect or trust local government, and that's obvious with this eccentric bill, the Local Government Act 2002 Amendment Bill 2012. It's obvious, Mr Speaker, in the lack of any robust analysis supporting the changes to the Substantive Act. And it's obvious in what the government has done in Canterbury. The Local Government and Environment Select Committee was hearing submissions in Christchurch this morning. We got a palpable demonstration of the frustration and sense of disempowerment that Canterbury residents feel through the ECAN Act and the new ECAN bill. And it's the same sense of disempowerment of Wellington coming in and trampling on local communities that is at the heart of this local government amendment bill. Because, Mr Speaker, local government should be accountable primarily to its communities through the consultation it does through its councillors and board members representing their constituencies and through a right to vote every 3 years. And it's this bill and the removal of the purpose of local government being the promotion of the four well-beings and the increased powers of ministerial interference which fundamentally changes the relationship that local communities have with their council, and it puts those councils under Wellington's thumb, and it will certainly have councils and their staff looking over their shoulder to what the Minister thinks in Wellington, and that's why, one of the reasons why the Green Party is opposing this bill. Mr Speaker, as a new Member of Parliament, I had understood that select committees were the workhorses of Parliament, that they were the one place where you could get some sensible, constructive debate rather than the sometimes oppositional and purely oppositional debate that we get in this chamber. There were more than 510 submissions from individuals and organisations on the bill. They took a lot of time to write thoughtful, constructive submissions, and many people appeared before the Select Committee's hearings. The vast majority of submitters opposed the bill. Yet, have there been any significant changes to the bill? No. And this failure to respond to community views undermines trust in democracy and undermines trust in Parliament when the government is so unresponsive to public opinion. But it was certainly a privilege to hear those submissions from councils, community organisations, residents groups, local board members, outlining the scope of activities that councils were involved in and the way in which small amounts of council funds could often leverage work that community organisations, early childhood centres, artistic organisations were doing in the community to promote our well-being. It was all about creating attractive, safe and healthy places to live, and that's what the promotion of well-being is all about. So I want, on behalf of the Green Party, to pay tribute to all of the work that councils, councillors, their staff are doing throughout New Zealand to create good places to live. And that is the benefit of having a purpose that is focused on the promotion of community wellbeing. And the Huronui District Council was one of the many councils that came along to describe the breadth of its services and the way in which they responded to community needs and the way in which that is imperilled by the change of purpose. As Mr Twyford mentioned, Ashburton runs health centres, so does Huronui. It has 4 health centres. How can these be described as core services or core infrastructure? Yet they are providing for a fundamental community need because they attract GPs and health professionals to a large rural district, and they make sure by being there that residents have easy access to those health services. So that sort of service, the elderly housing that Huronui and other councils provide, is potentially jeopardised by the change in purpose and by commercial organisations being able to challenge the direction of council funds to things such as health centres. Huronui is another example. It owns and manages the Hamner Springs thermal pools and spa, and it's the revenue from that business, which again is not a core piece of infrastructure, it's not a core service, but it significantly offsets rates. So if a commercial provider wants to buy up that complex, can it use the change in the purpose that this bill is promoting to push the council to sell up? So the Green Party also opposes the bill because of the substantially increased powers for the Minister to meddle in local government as it has done in Canterbury and to undermine democracy by doing that. And Mr Speaker, just as this national government is selling off our state assets, our energy companies, there is a real risk that a national and ACT government would use the increased ministerial intervention powers in the bill, combined with the financial performance benchmarks, to pressure councils, particularly the Christchurch City Council, to sell off its assets to avoid any increase in rates. And Mr Speaker, the Minister David Carter, it was around May, in an interview in Q&A, talked about the ability of central government to interfere with local government decisions around rates is very, very limited, and we want more ability for central government to work more closely so we can manage some of these things. And he went on to promote the sale of shares in airport companies and port companies. So that is the ideological agenda behind the bill, to put pressure on councils through the ministerial powers of intervention, through the performance benchmarks, to actually sell a lot of their assets. And Mr Speaker, one of the reasons for that is the very loose way in which significant problem, which is a trigger for ministerial interference, is defined. It's very, very broad. One of the other reasons the Green Party opposes this bill is the agenda of supersising councils and the provisions in the bill for reorganisation. Again, those deny democracy because they deny communities the right to an automatic vote in any reorganisation or amalgamation proposal. They put the burden on the community to have a petition signed by 10% of electors before there can be a poll, and when there is a poll, it's got to be across all of the area affected by the amalgamation, not by each individual area. And as we saw in Nelson Tasman, where you get individual areas, residents able to vote, they send their opinion loud and clear, and they didn't support amalgamation. So it's this agenda for streamlining proposals which actually cuts the voice of local communities, their ability to have an automatic right to decide their governance structures for their communities. This government has a think big agenda in local government. It has an agenda to take the local out of local government, to have it dominated by Wellington and the Wellington agenda, and it's an agenda that we oppose. As other members have said, the bill is back to front with the changes it's making because we haven't seen the Productivity Commission review. But when the majority of public submissions was against the bill, it is a breach of trust for the government to continue with the bill without making any substantive changes to it, without reinstating the well-beings, reducing the ministerial powers and allowing an automatic right to vote on any amalgamation proposal.
Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We heard a lot of submissions